All right, welcome back to Decoded Influence, where we like to really kind of get into the nitty gritty of how the world works, all those hidden systems and strategies that are kind of operating behind the scenes. And today we've got a real treat because we've been getting a ton of requests from you guys to do a deep dive on Robert Greene, the author who's basically, rewritten the playbook on power strategy. And we're talking all the classics, the 48 Laws of Power, The Art of Seduction, Mastery. He even wrote a book on military strategy called The 33 Strategies of War. I mean, this guy like really gets into the nuts and bolts of how to influence people in situations. So we're going to try to decode all that today. And to help us kind of connect the dots between all these powerful and, let's be honest, sometimes kind of controversial ideas, we've got our resident expert who knows Greene's work inside and out.
Yeah, Greene's work is it's always thought-provoking,
Yeah.
because he gives us this lens for understanding not just like individual behavior, but like the larger systems of power that are shaping our world.
Right. It's like he's pulling back the curtain on this hidden world of power dynamics.
Hmm.
So let's start with a book that's become kind of a modern classic, The 48 Laws of Power. One of the laws that I know you highlighted that really struck me was this idea of never outshine the master.
Mm.
Now, I got to say, that one feels kind of counterintuitive at first, right? Like, isn't ambition a good thing?
Well, ambition is definitely important, but Greene argues that making your superiors feel powerful is actually crucial for your own success. It's
Yeah.
like instead of directly challenging authority, which tends to trigger defensiveness, right? You want to find ways to subtly showcase your skills while also like generously giving credit where credit is due.
So it's like you're playing the game, but you're doing it in a way that makes those in power feel secure.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you're positioning yourself as an invaluable asset, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Think about like all those historical figures who wielded influence behind the scenes, right? Like advisors to kings, political strategists, those kind of folks. They understood that like overt power grabs often backfire spectacularly. True influence comes from understanding the psychology of those in charge.
Okay, that actually makes me think of another law from the book, which is maybe even more controversial.
Yeah.
Never trust friends too much. Use enemies.
Hmm.
I mean, is Green like advocating for ruthlessness here?
Well, not necessarily. I think what he's pointing out is that like shifting alliances create really interesting power dynamics. Like think about it. Former enemies, once they've switched sides, can be incredibly loyal. They've already demonstrated a willingness to betray, right? So they have a lot to prove to their new allies.
So it's less about using people and more about understanding their motivations and recognizing that. Like today's rival could be tomorrow's most valuable asset, depending on how the circumstances change.
Precisely. It's about analyzing the playing field and recognizing that relationships are rarely static. People act in their own self-interest, and those interests can shift in unpredictable ways.
Okay, one more law from the 48 laws that I just got to ask you about because it just fascinates me.
Mm.
Conceal your intentions.
Hmm.
This one feels like it applies to so many areas of life, negotiation, business, even personal relationships, right?
Oh, absolutely. Strategic ambiguity can be incredibly powerful. If your rivals or competitors can't predict your moves, they can't effectively counter them, right? By keeping your true goals kind of shrouded, you maintain the element of surprise and keep the other side off balance.
It's like a poker game. You don't want to show your hand before the final bet. It's about carefully controlling the information you release to maintain an advantage.
Exactly. Think about like launching a new product, right?
Yeah.
If you hint at these groundbreaking features but you don't reveal the specifics, you generate all this buzz and anticipation, which makes the eventual launch even more impactful.
Okay, so these laws, they're like almost like mental jujitsu, right? You're using your opponent's weight against them. But are we really supposed to follow these laws? Like strict rules? I mean, things could get pretty ethically murky pretty quickly.
Right. That's the thing with Green, right? You got to be careful. He himself emphasizes that these are tools, not commandments. They're insights into how power operates, but it's up to each individual to decide how and when to use them.
Right? It's like having a toolbox full of, power tools. You wouldn't use a jackhammer to hang a picture frame. The key is understanding the context and using the right tool for the right job.
Exactly. Green's work is about understanding the mechanics of power, not endorsing like a particular moral code. It's up to us to wield that knowledge responsibly.
Okay, that makes me feel a bit more comfortable. But let's shift gears now to a different kind of power, the art of seduction. Now, before anyone gets the wrong idea, we're not just talking about romantic conquests here, right?
Right, right. Green's art of seduction is really about the psychology of persuasion, how to captivate people's attention and subtly influence their desires. And he argues that these principles apply way beyond the realm of romance.
Okay, so he lays out these 9 seducer archetypes,
Hmm.
from the siren to the rake to the ideal lover. It's like a personality test for understanding how people attract and influence others.
Yeah, it's a framework for recognizing patterns in human behavior. And you see these archetypes everywhere: leadership, marketing, even just like everyday social interactions. Understanding them can help you decode people's motivations and also like refine your own persuasive style.
Okay, so give us an example. Like, how might one of these archetypes, say the siren, show up in a business setting?
Okay. Imagine a CEO who like captivates their audience with this compelling vision, right? They have this contagious energy that draws people in. They might not be the most detail-oriented person, but their seductive aura inspires others to like buy into their ideas.
Oh, I see. So it's not just about looks or charm. It's about tapping into this deeper psychological need, like a desire to be part of something larger than oneself.
Exactly. And Greene goes even deeper, breaking down the entire seductive process, right? It starts with choosing the right target, someone who's susceptible to your particular charms, someone with a need you can fulfill.
And then it's about creating a sense of mystery, sending mixed signals, playing hard to get, those classic seduction tactics. It's about creating desire and anticipation.
It's a fascinating, if somewhat unsettling, playbook for like building a devoted following or gaining buy-in for your ideas or even just, convincing someone to go on that second date.
But this all feels a bit manipulative, doesn't it? Like, where do we draw the line between persuasion and exploitation?
That's the ethical dilemma at the heart of a lot of Greene's work, right? And to be fair to him, he does acknowledge the potential for misuse. He actually has an entire section in The Art of Seduction dedicated to what he calls the dark side of seduction.
So how do we use this knowledge for good? How do we avoid becoming the villain in our own story?
Well, I think awareness is key. By understanding like the mechanics of seduction, we can recognize when those techniques are being used on us. And we can also choose to use them ethically, like for genuine connection and collaboration rather than for just personal gain at someone else's expense.
So it's not about being a master manipulator. It's about understanding the tools of persuasion and using them responsibly. Okay, that makes sense. Now, let's move on to a topic that's a bit less about manipulation and a bit more about, well, self-development, I guess you could say.
Mm.
Mastery.
Yeah, mastery. That's a good one.
In mastery, Greene argues that true expertise isn't about innate talent. It's a process, a journey of dedicated learning, deliberate practice, and deep immersion in your chosen field.
Right. It's like you got to put in the time.
He talks about the crucial role of apprenticeship, right? Like submitting to the guidance of someone more experienced, finding a mentor who can challenge you and push you beyond your comfort zone.
Absolutely. And history is filled with these transformative mentorships, right? Like Leonardo da Vinci apprenticing under Verrocchio,
Hmm.
or Marie Curie collaborating with her husband Pierre. These relationships weren't just about technical skills, they were about fostering a mindset, a way of thinking that enabled them to achieve those breakthroughs.
So it's not just about finding someone who's good at something. It's about finding someone who can help you see the world differently. Someone who can unlock your own potential in a way that you might not even be aware of.
Exactly. But Green also points out that like the goal isn't to just become a copy of your mentor. True mastery involves absorbing their knowledge, but eventually surpassing them, forging your own path.
And that's where his concept of social intelligence comes in, right? He argues it's like a crucial element of mastery.
Yes, definitely. And this connects back to his other work on power dynamics. It's about understanding the unspoken rules of the game, the subtle cues, the often hidden power structures that shape our interactions.
So it's not just about being technically skilled, it's about being able to navigate the social landscape, to read people, to understand their motivations, to anticipate their moves.
Exactly. Think of it as developing like a sixth sense for social dynamics.
It's almost like those scenes in The Matrix where Neo starts seeing the code behind reality.
Hmm.
Suddenly he understands how the system works and he can manipulate it to his advantage.
Uh-huh. That's a great analogy. Social intelligence gives you that X-ray vision to see through the surface and understand the underlying currents driving human behavior.
I like that. But mastery isn't just about mimicking others or playing these social games, right? Greene also talks about the importance of the creative spark, the need to combine knowledge with experimentation.
Absolutely. He encourages us to like push boundaries, to take what we've learned from our mentors and apply it in novel ways, to experiment, take risks, and ultimately forge our own unique path.
So it's a delicate balance of discipline and creativity. It's about learning from the past, but not being afraid to break the mold, to innovate, to make something truly new.
Exactly. Mastery is about becoming not just a master of your craft, but a master of yourself.
All right, I'm feeling inspired. So, feeling inspired to conquer the world yet? Well, get ready, because we're about to take things to a whole new level with the 33 strategies of war. Now, before you start stockpiling weapons, let me clarify. This book isn't about actual warfare. It's about taking military principles and applying them to the challenges we face every day. In business, in relationships, in any area where strategic thinking can give you an edge. One of the strategies that jumped out at me from your notes is declare war on your enemies. Now, I'm all for a good metaphor, but can we maybe reframe this a bit for a civilian audience?
Sure, sure. I think what Greene is really advocating for here is total commitment to your goals. It's about avoiding those half-hearted efforts and attacking your objectives with unwavering focus and determination.
So less about literal enemies and more about conquering your own self-doubt and going after what you want with everything you've got. It's about that no retreat, no surrender mentality.
Exactly. Indecision and hesitation can actually be more costly than bold action. When you fully commit, you project confidence, you gain momentum, and you force things to happen.
I like that. Declare war on your own inertia. All right, speaking of bold moves, what about the strategy? Use the surprise attack. This one seems tailor-made for those who like to keep people guessing.
Oh, absolutely. The element of surprise can be incredibly powerful in negotiation, in creative fields, even in personal relationships. Think about a competitor who launches a product no one saw coming, or an artist who introduces a radical new style that disrupts the status quo.
Right, it's about strategic disruption, about catching people off guard and using that moment of disorientation to your advantage.
Precisely. But it's important to use the strategy ethically.
Yep.
You don't want to be blindsiding people in a way that's harmful or deceptive.
Right, it's about strategic maneuvering, not manipulation.
Exactly. And it requires more than just like a random act of surprise. Greene emphasizes that effective strategic thinking comes from deep knowledge and the ability to adapt to changing circumstances.
So it's not just about being unpredictable. It's about being one step ahead, anticipating your opponent's moves while also being prepared to pivot when they throw a curveball.
Precisely. It's like a chess game, but with much higher stakes.
All right, we've covered power, seduction, mastery, even war. But there's one more piece of the puzzle we need to decode. Human nature itself.
Ah, yes, the ultimate mystery.
In the laws of human nature, Greene argues that understanding the psychological forces that drive us is crucial for navigating the world effectively. And one of the most fundamental laws he explores is the power of irrationality. I mean, we like to think of ourselves as rational beings, but let's be honest. How often do we actually make decisions based on emotion rather than logic?
More often than we'd probably like to admit. Greene provides some fascinating examples of how our emotions can lead us astray. Impulsive purchases, falling for scams, even making decisions that go against our own best interests.
Okay, so how do we avoid becoming victims of our own irrationality? How do we become more aware of those hidden forces that are driving our behavior?
Well, I think the first step is acknowledging that we're not always as rational as we think we are. By recognizing that our emotions can sometimes cloud our judgment, we can start to detach from them and make more objective decisions. It's about learning to pause, to question our assumptions, and to consider the long-term consequences of our actions.
Easier said than done, right? But I guess the first step is just recognizing that we're all susceptible to these emotional biases.
Absolutely. We're all wired with these deep-seated psychological tendencies. And Greene doesn't shy away from exploring the darker side of human nature as well, right? Traits like narcissism and envy.
Ooh, now we're getting to the good stuff.
Yeah.
Give us the lowdown on how these traits play out in the real world.
Well, think about the narcissistic boss who takes credit for everyone else's work, right? Or the envious coworker who subtly sabotages your success. These behaviors often stem from deep-seated insecurities and this need for validation.
And it all ties back to those power dynamics we discussed earlier, right? Narcissists are often masters of manipulation, using their charm and charisma to exploit others. And envy can drive people to engage in all sorts of destructive behavior. It's like a psychological thriller playing out in the office. But seriously, how do we deal with these dark forces without letting them drag us down?
Again, I think awareness is key. By recognizing these traits in ourselves and others, we can start to understand their motivations and develop strategies for navigating them effectively.
So it's about recognizing the signs, setting boundaries, and protecting our own energy.
Exactly. We can learn to set boundaries with narcissists, avoid feeding their egos, and focus on our own self-worth. And we can channel our own envy into healthy competition, using it as motivation to improve ourselves rather than tearing others down.
Okay, so it's about taking the high road, understanding the psychology at play, and not letting those negative emotions control us. All right, we've covered a lot of ground here. From the 48 Laws of Power to the art of seduction to the depths of human nature, Robert Greene has given us a lot to think about. But I think there's one more crucial takeaway here, one that ties everything together: the importance of self-awareness.
Absolutely. Throughout his work, Greene emphasizes that understanding ourselves, our strengths, weaknesses, biases, tendencies, is essential for navigating the world effectively.
It's like that ancient Greek aphorism, know thyself. It's about looking inward before we try to influence the world around us.
Exactly. When we understand our own motivations, we can make more conscious choices about how we interact with others. We can avoid falling prey to our own biases and use our strengths to our advantage. Self awareness is the foundation of all effective strategy, all meaningful relationships, and all true personal growth.
So it's not just about decoding the world, it's about decoding ourselves. And that is where things get really interesting. We're going to take a quick break here, but when we come back, we'll delve even deeper into the practical applications of Greene's work, how we can use these insights to navigate the complexities of power, persuasion, and human interaction in our everyday lives. Stay tuned.
So, welcome back to Decoded Influence. Before the break, we were talking about how self awareness is like the foundation for understanding and applying Robert Greene's ideas.
Yeah, it's like Greene is giving us this map to this hidden world of power dynamics and influence, but just knowing the terrain doesn't mean you're going to find the treasure, right? You still need like the skills to navigate it effectively.
Exactly. Let's talk about some practical ways we can actually apply these insights to our everyday lives. Starting with one of Greene's core principles, understanding power dynamics.
Okay, power dynamics, it sounds a little intimidating, but I guess it boils down to recognizing like who holds the influence in any given situation, and it's not always obvious, right?
Absolutely. Power can manifest in so many ways: position, knowledge, charisma, even social connections.
Hmm.
It's not just about who's like the boss on paper, but who really holds the cards, so to speak.
It's about recognizing the subtle cues, the unspoken hierarchies, those currents of influence that are kind of flowing beneath the surface.
Precisely. And once you start to see those dynamics, you can navigate them more strategically. Let's say you're trying to pitch a new idea at work. If you can identify the key decision makers, the people whose opinions carry the most weight, and you can tailor your presentation to their interests, you're way more likely to get buy-in.
So it's about understanding not just the message, but the messenger, right? You need to know who to target with your ideas and how to frame them in a way that resonates with their particular motivations.
Exactly. And that might involve a bit of what Green calls strategic maneuvering, like aligning yourself with the right people, building relationships that can amplify your influence.
Okay, so we've got power dynamics. What about seduction? How do we translate those principles into actionable advice without, feeling like we're resorting to seduction tactics?
Right, right. Remember, Green's concept of seduction is about way more than just romance. It's really about creating a connection, a sense of resonance with another person.
So less about tricks and manipulation and more about genuine engagement.
Exactly. Think about it this way. We're all naturally drawn to people who make us feel good, people who listen attentively, who validate our opinions, who make us feel
It's
understood.
about making that person feel seen, heard, valued, not just as a means to an end, but as a human being worthy of respect and attention.
Precisely. And those are qualities that can serve us well in any area of life, not just romantic pursuits.
Right. Whether we're trying to persuade a client, connect with a colleague, or simply deepen a friendship, those qualities of genuine connection, they're incredibly powerful. Okay, moving on to a topic that feels a bit less Machiavellian: mastery. I love this idea of achieving mastery in a particular field, but it feels like such a daunting, almost mythical concept. Like, how do we even begin to approach that level of expertise?
Well, remember, Green frames mastery as a process, not a destination. It's a lifelong pursuit, a commitment to constant learning and growth.
So it's less about reaching some ultimate level of perfection and more about embracing the journey of continual improvement.
Exactly. And it starts with identifying those areas where you have a natural inclination, a genuine passion.
It's about finding your purpose. You're calling that thing that gets you so excited, you lose track of time.
Precisely. Then it's about committing to the hard work of developing your skills, honing your craft, and pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone. And that's where the concept of apprenticeship becomes so crucial.
Right. Finding a mentor, someone who can guide you, challenge you, and push you to reach your full potential.
Exactly. But remember, the goal isn't to become a carbon copy of your mentor. True mastery involves taking what you've learned, synthesizing it with your own unique perspective, and ultimately creating something new.
So it's about taking inspiration from those who've come before you, but ultimately forging your own path.
Precisely. And that requires a combination of discipline, creativity, and a willingness to experiment and take risks.
It's about becoming not just a master of your craft, but a master of your own learning process, your own creative evolution. Okay, so I've got power dynamics, seduction, and mastery. Now let's talk about something that feels a bit more, well, aggressive. Those war strategies. Can we really apply those principles to everyday life without, actually declaring war on everyone?
Of course. Remember, the 33 Strategies of War is about strategic thinking, about anticipating challenges, assessing your resources, and developing plans to overcome obstacles.
So it's about being proactive, not reactive. It's about taking control of situations rather than letting them control you.
Exactly. And it's about being adaptable, recognizing that no plan survives contact with the enemy, so to speak. You need to be able to adjust your strategy on the fly based on those ever-changing circumstances.
Because, life, like war,
Yeah.
is full of unexpected twists and turns.
Precisely. So it's about cultivating a mindset of flexibility, resilience, and a willingness to embrace uncertainty.
It's about being a warrior, not in the literal sense of engaging in combat, but in the sense of facing your challenges head on with courage, determination, and a strategic mindset. Okay, we've explored a lot of ground here: power, seduction, mastery, even war. But ultimately, it all comes back to understanding that most fundamental element: human nature.
Right. In The Laws of Human Nature, Greene dives deep into the psychological forces that drive our behavior, both the noble and the not so noble.
And one of the most fascinating concepts he explores is the power of irrationality. We like to think of ourselves as these rational beings, but let's be real, our emotions often play a much larger role in our decision-making than we'd care to admit.
Absolutely. And Greene provides some compelling examples of how those emotions can lead us astray, from impulsive purchases to falling prey to scams to clinging to beliefs that go against all logic.
So how do we avoid becoming victims of our own irrationality? How do we start to recognize those emotional biases that are kind of subtly influencing our behavior?
Well, I think, as we've discussed, the first step is self-awareness. We need to acknowledge that we're not always as rational as we think we are. We all have blind spots, and we all make decisions based on emotion rather than pure logic.
Right, it's about recognizing that we're all susceptible to these emotional undercurrents, these unconscious biases that can steer us off course.
Exactly. And once we start to recognize those patterns in ourselves, we can start to develop strategies for mitigating their influence. We can learn to pause before reacting, to question our assumptions, and to consider the long-term consequences of our actions.
It's about cultivating that inner observer, that part of us that can step back and assess the situation objectively without getting swept away by the emotional tide. Now, Greene doesn't shy away from exploring the darker side of human nature as well, those traits that can lead to conflict, manipulation, and even self-sabotage.
Right. He delves into some pretty fascinating and often unsettling psychological tendencies: narcissism, envy, the desire for power and control.
Okay, let's start with narcissism.
Hmm.
We all know those people who seem to have this inflated sense of self-importance, a constant need for admiration. But what's really going on beneath the surface?
Well, narcissists often operate from a place of deep insecurity. Their grandiose self-image is like a defense mechanism, a way of compensating for those underlying feelings of inadequacy.
So it's not just about vanity, it's about a fragile ego that needs constant validation.
Exactly. And that's why they can be so sensitive to criticism, so quick to anger when their self-image is threatened.
That's like they're constantly walking on eggshells, terrified of being exposed as a fraud.
That's a great analogy, and that's why dealing with narcissists can be so challenging. They're often masters of manipulation, using charm and charisma to get what they want.
So how do we avoid getting sucked into their drama? How do we protect ourselves from those manipulative tactics?
Well, I think the key is to set boundaries. Don't engage in arguments or try to reason with them, because it'll only escalate the situation.
So it's about detaching emotionally and recognizing that their behavior is more about them than it is about you.
Exactly. Their actions are driven by their own internal struggles, not by any personal malice towards you.
Okay, that's helpful. It's easy to take their behavior personally and get caught up in their drama.
Hmm.
Now, what about envy? It's such a corrosive emotion, that feeling of resentment or bitterness towards someone who has something you want. How do we deal with envious people? And how do we manage our own feelings of envy?
Envy is a natural human emotion, but it can be incredibly destructive if we let it consume us. Envious people often feel threatened by the success of others, and they may try to sabotage or undermine those they perceive as rivals.
So it's about recognizing the signs of envy in others. The subtle digs, the backhanded compliments, the passive-aggressive attempts to diminish your achievements.
Exactly. And it's about understanding that their behavior is often rooted in their own insecurities, their own feelings of inadequacy.
It's not really about you, it's about their own internal struggles.
Precisely. And while we can't control other people's emotions, we can control how we react to them.
So it's about taking the high road, rising above the negativity, and focusing on our own goals.
Exactly. And when it comes to managing our own feelings of envy, the first step is acknowledging that we're feeling it.
Right? It's about being honest with ourselves and recognizing that those feelings are normal, even if they're not always pleasant.
Exactly. Then we can start to explore the root of those feelings. What is it about that person's success that triggers envy in us?
Is it something we truly desire for ourselves? Or is it something we think we should desire based on societal expectations or comparisons?
That's a great question to ask yourself. Once we understand the underlying reasons for our envy, we can start to channel those feelings into something more productive.
So instead of letting envy consume us, we can use it as motivation to improve ourselves, to pursue our own goals with renewed passion and determination.
Exactly. Envy can be a powerful motivator if we can harness it effectively.
All right, we've covered so much ground in this deep dive, from the subtle art of persuasion to the bold strategies of warfare to the complex dynamics of human emotion. It's a lot to process, but I think the key takeaway is this. Robert Greene's work is not a manual for manipulation or exploitation. It's a framework for understanding the forces that shape human behavior and using that knowledge to navigate the world more effectively.
Beautifully put. It's about becoming more conscious of the game we're all playing, recognizing the rules, understanding the players, and developing the skills to play strategically, ethically, and ultimately successfully.
So it's not about winning at all costs. It's about winning the right way, by using our knowledge and influence to create positive change in our own lives and in the world around us. And on that note, we're going to take another quick break. When we come back, we'll explore some final thoughts and takeaways from our deep dive into the world of Robert Greene. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Decoded Influence. So we spent this whole deep dive exploring the world of Robert Greene, his ideas about power, seduction, mastery, strategy, you name it.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey.
It really has. Now, as we kind of wrap up this epic exploration,
hmm
I'm curious, what are some key takeaways we can all actually apply to our own lives?
hmm
And how do we do it ethically? How do we use these insights effectively but responsibly?
That's the big question, right? It's like Green has given us this incredible toolkit, but it's up to us to use those tools responsibly.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to understand the mechanics of power and persuasion, but it's quite another to actually wield them in the real world.
Yeah.
Where do we even begin?
Right. Well, I think one of the most important things to remember is that Green's laws and strategies, they're not like moral absolutes. They're observations about human behavior, about how power and influence work in the world.
So it's not about becoming some Machiavellian manipulator. It's about understanding the game so we can play it more effectively and hopefully with a strong sense of ethics.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the importance of self-awareness, right? Green emphasizes this again and again throughout his work. Knowing yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses, your values, it's absolutely crucial for navigating this whole complex world of human interaction.
Yeah, it's like that old saying, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles.
Mhm.
But in this case, the enemy isn't necessarily other people. It's often our own biases, our blind spots, the parts of ourselves that can sabotage our success without us even realizing it.
Oh, that's so true. We can be our own worst enemies
We
sometimes.
really
Yeah.
can.
So before we even start thinking about influencing others, we need to understand our own internal landscape. What drives us? What holds us back? What are the principles that guide our actions?
So self-awareness is the foundation.
Yeah.
Right? Got it. But once we've kind of done that inner work, how do we actually put Green's insights into practice? Where do we start?
Well, one way is to simply become more attuned to the power dynamics that are already operating in your life. Like, who are the influencers in your workplace, in your social circles, in your family? What are their motivations? How do they exert their influence?
It's like becoming a social scientist. Yeah. Observing the interactions, the subtle cues, the unspoken rules that kind of govern how people behave in different situations.
Exactly. And once you start seeing these patterns, you can navigate them more consciously. You can choose when to assert your own influence, when to blend in, and when to strategically align yourself with those who hold the power.
It's about becoming more aware of the currents of influence that are always flowing around us and learning to either swim with them or navigate against them strategically. Okay, power dynamics, check. What about seduction? How do we apply those principles without crossing the line into manipulation? Without feeling like we're being inauthentic.
Remember, seduction, as Greene defines it, is about creating a connection, a resonance with another person. It's about understanding their desires, their fears, their values, and finding ways to align with them.
So it's less about using tricks or techniques and more about genuine empathy and understanding. It's about creating win-win situations where both parties feel valued and respected.
Precisely. Think about the people in your life who you find most persuasive, most captivating. They're often the ones who make you feel seen, heard, and understood.
Yeah, they draw you in with their stories, their passion, their ability to connect on a deeper level. They make you feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself.
Exactly. And those are skills that we can all cultivate. It's about being present, listening attentively, and finding ways to create those shared
So
experiences.
it's about building bridges, not walls. It's about finding common ground and creating a sense of shared purpose. All right.
Ah,
Power dynamics and seduction. We've covered it. Now, what about mastery? I love the concept, but it feels like such a long and kind of arduous journey. How do we even get started with that?
Remember, mastery is a process, not an endpoint. It's about embracing that journey, finding joy in the pursuit of excellence.
So it's less about being perfect and more about striving to be better each day. It's about that constant push for growth and improvement.
Exactly. And it starts with, identifying your passions, the areas where you have a natural inclination, a genuine desire to excel.
It's about finding your purpose, your calling, that thing that gets you so excited you lose track of time.
Precisely. Then it's about committing to the hard work of developing your skills, honing your craft, and pushing yourself beyond that comfort zone. And that's where, finding a mentor can be so valuable, someone who can guide you, challenge you, and inspire you to reach your full potential.
Yeah, it's about finding your Yoda, your Mr. Miyagi, that person who can unlock your potential and guide you on that path to mastery.
Totally. And it's also about being a lifelong learner, staying curious, constantly seeking out new knowledge and experiences that can help you grow.
So mastery is about being a student of life, always evolving, always expanding your horizons. All right, so we've talked about power, seduction, mastery. We even talked about war. But how do we apply those war strategies to everyday life without, you know, actually going to war?
Right. Remember, the 33 Strategies of War is about strategic thinking, anticipating challenges, assessing your resources, and developing plans to overcome obstacles. It's about having a clear objective and a well-defined strategy for achieving it.
So it's about being proactive, not reactive. It's about taking control of your life and shaping your own destiny, rather than just being tossed around by the winds of fate.
Exactly. And it's about being adaptable, recognizing that things rarely go according to plan. You need to be able to adjust your strategy based on those ever-changing circumstances.
Because as Mike Tyson famously said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Ha, exactly. Life is full of unexpected twists and turns, so we need to be flexible, resilient, and always ready to adjust our strategy.
So it's about being a warrior, not in the literal sense of, engaging in combat, but in the sense of facing your challenges head on with courage, determination, and a strategic mindset. Wow, we have covered so much ground in this deep dive. From the subtle art of persuasion to the bold strategies of warfare, Robert Greene has given us a lot to think about. But as we wrap up this epic exploration, I think the most important takeaway is this. Greene's work, it's not a recipe for manipulation or exploitation. It's a framework for understanding the dynamics of human interaction and using that knowledge to achieve our goals in a way that's both effective and ethical.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's about harnessing the power of influence for good, for creating positive change in our own lives and in the world around us.
So it's not about winning at all costs. It's about winning the right way by using our knowledge and skills to make a positive impact. And on that note, we're going to wrap up this episode of Decoded Influence. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of Robert Greene. And as always, we want to hear from you. What resonated most with you from this episode? What are some of the strategies or insights you plan to try out in your own life? Head over to our website and let us know in the comments section. And be sure to check out our archives for more Decoded Influence episodes on a wide range of topics. From the psychology of persuasion to the art of negotiation to the secrets of success, we've got a treasure trove of information waiting for you. Until next time, keep decoding the world around you. And most importantly, keep decoding yourself.